Welcome to week 4 of Bible Studies for Life. Continuing in the book of John today, another miracle, another sign of Jesus's power, his movement, his person, who he is. That's what this is about. Seeing these things that he did and how it shows that he is, in fact, the Son of God, the Messiah, the one who came to save us. So, looking forward to this passage out of John chapter 6 today. Before we look at that, if you haven't already, you need to subscribe, you need to like, comment, share this video with somebody else. Tell us where you're watching from. Give a question, whatever you've got, put it in there. We appreciate that. Let's look. John chapter 6. After this, Jesus crossed the Sea of Galilee, or Tiberias. A huge crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was performing by healing the sick. Jesus went up a mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Okay, we'll see Jesus going back and forth across the Sea of Galilee. We'll see him cross from one side to the other a couple of times, even in the passages that we're looking at, right? And we've got this crowd following, okay? So they are clearly having to walk around the sea to get to the other side. Wherever he is, there are people that are going everywhere because of the signs that he is performing, the healing of the sick. People are wanting to see. Now look, this makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if we knew somebody today who was healing people, there would be crowds there. Not the fake healing, but the real healing that took place. You couldn't keep back the crowds, right? He goes up a mountain and he sits down there with his disciples, and the crowd comes to him. Now, the Passover, a Jewish festival, was near, so when Jesus looked up and noticed a huge crowd coming toward him, he asked Philip, "Where will we buy bread so that these people can eat?" He asked this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread wouldn't be enough for each of them to have a little. He said, we could have, half a year's, more than a year's wages. We're not going to get there, right? Okay, so he sees the huge crowd coming, right? So then he asks Philip, where are we going to buy bread so everybody can eat? Where are we going to get the food for these people? They need food. All these people are coming, and, they're desperate, and they're not bringing meals with them. They need to feed them, right? We can't go to McDonald's. There's no McDonald's nearby. You can't send them out to the restaurants. That doesn't exist. They're not going to be able to feed all these people, right? But here's what's interesting. Verse 6, this is John writing, okay? So you remember, John's telling the story knowing what's going to happen, obviously, right? So he asked this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Jesus knew what he was going to do. Jesus knew what the answer to this question was. He knew what would happen. He's asking Philip, how are we going to do this? What's going to happen? And Philip says, get 200 denarii. That's more than half a year's wages. We can't feed them. There's no way, right? There's not enough. So what are we going to do? Then one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, well, there's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many? Now, pick this up, right? Jesus doesn't say, comb the crowd and find what you can find. Andrew, one of the things Andrew does is Andrew's always just bringing people to Jesus, right? He brought Peter to Jesus. He says, well, there's a boy that's got 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but that ain't going to go very far. I mean, we got however many, 100,000. We got thousands of people here. That's what we find out, right? 5 loaves of bread and a couple of fish is not going to go very far, right? Jesus says, have the people sit down. Well, there's plenty of grass in that place, so they sat down. The men numbered 5,000. Okay, now it says the men numbered 5,000. Now, the thought here is that there's probably more than just men there. They're counting the men who are the heads of households, maybe, and so maybe there's 10 or 15 or 20,000 people that are here. Then Jesus took the loaves, and after giving thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also with the fish as much as they wanted. All right, we're going to go back. Philip says, look, we couldn't give each one of them a little. If we had half a year's wages, we couldn't give each one of them even a little bit. Now, Jesus, when he gives thanks and then passes out, he says, take all you want. Now, okay, it's buffet rules, right? Take all you want, but take all that you'll eat, right? You take it, then you better eat it. You don't take a lot from the buffet to have, a to-go box. You take what you're going to eat. You take what you want to eat. Take it. Now, what happens? I mean, look, we got 5 loaves, we got 2 fish. What happens if the first person takes 3 loaves? and the next person takes 3. Well, how were there 3 to begin with? I don't know how this worked, right? We don't know. I mean, you figure a loaf, a person, whatever, after the first 5 people, they were all gone. How does that work? Just the statement. Just the thought. Let's pass it out. There's 5, let's just say there's only 5,000. There's only 5,000. To look at a crowd of 5,000 and for Jesus to say, here, y'all split this up and then pass it out and tell people to just take what they want. Seriously? I mean, even for the disciples to take the baskets, that they've divided out and to start passing them out and to tell people, to tell the first person, just take what you want. There's some faith there, right? There's some trust in Jesus. When they were full, when everybody had had all they could eat, he told his disciples, collect the leftovers so that nothing is wasted. So they collected them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces from the 5 loaves that were left over by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign he had done, they said, this truly is the prophet who is to come into the world. Therefore, when Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Okay. This is clearly a miracle, right? The feeding of the 5,000, which is at least 5,000, but that they had leftovers. They were full. They got all they wanted. And then they had leftovers. They had 12 baskets of leftovers. They had more leftovers than they started with. Now, we've got all these, there's lessons here, right? You give to the Lord, and the Lord takes it, and he uses it, and there's left over when you've given it all to the Lord. He can take our little and make it into everything that he needs plus some, right? There's a lesson in that, right? But that's not the lesson of this story. We need to be sure that we're clear about what's going on here, what John is communicating. John is communicating the signs. Here is the sign, right? And the people saw this and they said, he is the prophet who is to come into the world. That means they said, he is the Messiah. They recognized this guy is the Messiah. That's what the sign was to them, a clear statement. Jesus is the Messiah, right? And in their minds, and this is the very common, and in fact is still a belief among Orthodox Jews, or let's say Reformed, let's say conservative Jews who still believe the Old Testament, okay? They still have this belief that the Messiah will come and he will become king of Israel and will rule over the world. And that's what they believed then the Messiah would be. And so when they saw Jesus do this, after all the other things he had done, they concluded he is the Messiah. He is the one who is to come. We must make him king, which is an interesting thing because the people can't make somebody the king like that. The people's job was not to make the Messiah the king if that's what he was to be. The Messiah would be the king. In fact, we know he is the king of all kings, the Lord of all lords, and the people had nothing to do with that. We can't make him the king. He is the king. He is the Lord. We can't do anything to get him there, but that was, we would just love to be able to almost in a sense have control over God because we can make the Messiah the king. Jesus is not having that. He withdrew to the mountain by himself. He left them, and it's almost that we see this often where he walks through the crowd and they can't touch him and he just goes. And that's what he does here. That is the point. This here is the point of the story. This is why John is telling the story. Now we got these other lessons, right, about you give to God what you have and let him multiply it. Let him take it and turn it into more than we could ever make it ourselves. That is absolutely the case. But the point of this message, the point of this story is this verification, this clear sense that people had based on what he was doing. That's a sign he is the Messiah. And this is where John's trying to get in his gospel. He wants people to know Jesus is the Messiah and to believe and trust in him. All right, I hope that's helped. Thanks for watching. This is a great story, and I think it's good to just put yourself in the place of the disciples and try to figure out how that worked, and to think about the miracle of what God does, and the fact that we don't have to explain it to know that it happened. We don't have to be able to explain it. We don't have to be able to understand it to know that God did it. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe, like, comment, share with somebody else, okay? We'll see you next time.